It takes me so long to film these wrap-ups that I can't make it through without a snack. Hello, it's me, Laurel Ann, here today with my signature video, the wrap-up, 2 weeks late. Today we're talking about the books I read in February. Let's just do it. Let's not have a bunch of ado before. Can you use that word that way? I don't know. I just did. The first book I read in February was The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. Man, it really feels like 1,000 years ago that I read this book. February is only 29 days, but this time, I don't know, felt long. This was recommended to me by a bookseller in Waterstones in Glasgow, so thanks to that bookseller because I actually liked this. A thriller, and I liked it. We're on kind of a good streak with thrillers lately, so let's hope that I can keep that up. This follows a group of 30-somethings who were best friends at Oxford as they meet together to celebrate New Year's Eve at like a very remote luxury hunting lodge in the Scottish Highlands. From the very beginning, you learn that somebody has died after the group got snowed in at the lodge. The rest of the book jumps back and forth between the manager at the lodge investigating the death and the events leading up to it, starting with the friends catching the train in London. This is definitely a bit of a slow burn. The cracks in this friendship group start to show very gradually, and the way they're revealed was very compelling. I think many of us can sort of relate to this slow decay of an old friendship or an old clique, and I think the toxicity in this friend group was pretty realistic actually. Like, even if a lot of the actual actions were pretty extreme and there were a few things that I could have done without. But I think that's definitely a building block to a really good thriller, is to take something that is very typical or even mundane and just amplify it into something insidious. This book, I think, gave me what I wanted from Ruth Ware's In a Dark, Dark Wood. The plot is pretty similar, but the characters are definitely more fleshed out and the whole thing just felt a little more grounded. I also, of course, loved the setting. I'm a sucker for anything set in the Highlands, and I think it's the perfect backdrop for a thriller. It's such a weird and beautiful and stark landscape. Yeah, good choice. I will say that I predicted the ending pretty much, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it just shows that the author did a good job of setting things up. So it's not really a problem for me. Might be a problem for some other people. And it wasn't like I knew, oh, this is exactly what's going to happen. It was just one of several thoughts that I had. Overall, I would definitely recommend this. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but it is, I think, a pretty solid thriller. If you hear noise, it's the cat playing with this Marshall's bag. The next book I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This is about artist Mia and her daughter Pearl, who move into a very idyllic suburban Midwestern town, and the Richardsons, who own the house that they move into. And as time wears on, these two families become more and more intertwined with one another until tensions really start to escalate. This is a story about mothers and daughters. It's about these families that really could not be more different, but at their core, they still struggle with the same pain and the same desires. It's about identity and not knowing who you truly are. It comments on class and race and the immigrant experience in America, and it's all wrapped up in this gorgeous little package with a gut punch of an ending. I loved it. Like, I loved it. It's one of these that has been sitting on my shelf for a long time because I knew I would love it, and I don't know, I know I'm not the only one who does this. I sort of shelve books because I feel like someday I might run out of books that I will like and that then I have to pick them up. I don't know, it's stupid, but whatever. I'm glad that I got to read this finally, because it just does so much and it's so beautifully written and it's very entertaining to read as well. I would say this is like a really good place to start with literary fiction if that's something that you are intimidated by for whatever reason. Celeste Ng, she knows what she's doing. I can say with 99% certainty that this is going to be on my favorite books of the year at the end of the year. Next, I read Winter by Ali Smith, which is the second in her seasonal quartet, which is a series of 4 standalone novels that she's been working on for the last few years. I think the last one, which will be Summer, is coming out this summer. And even though they are standalone stories, they're all connected by their themes, which are like the passage of time and the state of the world today. They're very stream of consciousness, which I believe is Ali Smith's signature style. I read Autumn a couple years ago, actually, and I kind of struggled with it. I sort of felt about it the way you might feel about like Celery, which is to say, I appreciated it and I recognized it as being good for me, so I was glad I read it, but I didn't necessarily enjoy reading it. I actually like reading books like that. I know not everybody does. So I thought that the entire seasonal quartet would be like that for me, but I actually found Winter so lovely and enjoyable. I don't know if that's just because I knew a little bit better what to expect, or if my tastes have changed, or if I just understood the particular references in this book a little bit better. So this one is about a man named Art who has just had a very bad breakup, and he hires a woman to pretend to be his girlfriend when he goes to visit his elderly mother for Christmas. When Art and this woman arrive, they find his mother in a very bad way, so they ask her sister to come. These two women have been estranged for a very long time because of extremely disparate political beliefs. Well, there he goes again. So that's the plot, but the plot in these books is very loose, and the thrill of them really lies outside of that. They are so rooted in the present. She comments on events as they happen practically in real time, and I find that very admirable because I think a lot of writers are understandably afraid to do that because they don't want their work to be dated, but it's very interesting and engaging to read. She also does a lot with wordplay. There are words whose meanings change from the beginning to the end of the book. There are also lots of really unique metaphors and weird magical realism, and it all just comes together to make these books really exciting to read because they're just so clever, and you sort of sit back in awe of what Ali Smith is doing. Next, I read Adele by Leïla Slimani, which was translated from the French by Sam Taylor. This is about a middle-class woman named Adele who seems to have it all together. She has a successful marriage, she has a healthy young son, and she has a journalistic career. But underneath all that, she's hiding what appears to be an insatiable sex addiction. Throughout the book, we see that she really needs to have sex every day. There are a couple times where she tries to stop, and after just a couple of days of not satiating her desire, she really sinks into a deep depression. And this compulsion leads her into some very scary and unsafe situations. So I read Slimani's Lullaby a couple of years ago. I think it's called The Perfect Nanny in the US. And I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I'm very glad that I read Adele because this one just did a little bit more for me. It's definitely darker and more uncomfortable, but it still explores some of the same themes that were compelling to me in Lullaby, namely societal expectations of women and the perversion of the ideal of the female caregiver. This is also a bit more of a focused character study, whereas Lullaby is more interested in the interactions between a small group of people. Adele, and I think maybe Leïla Slimani more generally, is definitely a bit of a Marmite situation. I know a lot of people have hated this book, but I found it pretty impressive. It manages to say so much, especially for such a slim little volume. And I think I would definitely recommend this for fans of Ottessa Moshfegh, who I mentioned in my last wrap-up. So if you're a fan of hers, you want to just scurry on over to Adele. If you want, you don't have to. Next, I reread these. This is Sabriel, Lirael, and Abhorsen by Garth. These make up the original Old Kingdom trilogy. I think these came out in like the very late 90s, early 2000s, and he has since written more books in this universe. But these were the ones that I remembered from when I was a kid, and I wanted to reread them, so I did. I actually had never read this one. But but now I have. I actually have a whole video coming on these, so I'm gonna try not to say too much so as not to be redundant. I'm gonna just hold up one because holding up 3 books is difficult. This is a YA fantasy series about a universe where there is magic. Wow. And one type of magic that some of the most evil members of this society engage in is necromancy. So we've got a bunch of necromancers running around, and to sort of keep them in check, there is the Abhorsen, who is like a reverse necromancer, I guess. He can cross into death and use these like magical bells to bind spirits in the underworld. So basically just making sure the dead people stay dead. Sabriel is about a woman who is 18 and her father is the Abhorsen. She doesn't really know him that well because she's grown up in a boarding school, and one day he sends a magical thing to her because he is dead and she has to like solve a problem that's happening in the world. Eloquent. Then these two take place about 14 years later and follow this girl named Lirael, who eventually meets Sabriel. So this is like one story, and then these two are like the sequel. These really just follow on right one after another. I think perhaps unsurprisingly, these two are a lot better than this one. This one's just, it's just a little bit rushed. I had a lot of fun reading these. They're good. Yeah. Not the greatest, but pretty good. And then last, but very far from least, I read Emma by Jane Austen. Also a reread. I was just getting into the nostalgia at the end of the month, I guess. If you've been alive on this planet for the last 2 months, you've probably seen the trailers for the new Emma movie, and they just made me very happy and excited, so I decided to reread Emma. This, of course, is about a very privileged young woman who is very clever, very witty, and also very selfish, though she tends to think of herself as being someone who is charitable and helpful. At the start of the book, Emma's governess, who has been with her since she was a very small child, leaves her and her father in order to get married. And so Emma is essentially, for the first time in her life, left to her own devices. Emma sees herself as being responsible for Miss Taylor's marriage, and so she fancies herself a great matchmaker. So she takes it upon herself to find a suitable match for a hapless young girl who she befriends named Harriet. I have always said that while I believe Emma is Austen's best book, that Pride and Prejudice is my favorite. But honestly, I might be rethinking that. Emma might be my favorite. It's just so funny and clever, and I think it's probably Austen's deepest character study. Also, like, I don't know what it was about this time around, but it actually got me a little hot and bothered. Like, when Mr. Knightley chastises Emma for being rude to Miss Bates, I was like, yes, like, reprimand me, Daddy. I also came to the realization that Jane Austen is kind of my Harry Potter. Okay, Harry Potter is my Harry Potter, but Jane Austen is maybe like my Star Wars, which is to say that these books just feel like so cozy and nostalgic to me, and I would definitely go to the theme park if one existed. I just wanted to cut in to say that I did see the movie, and it is also excellent. Beautiful costumes, amazing music, great performances, the writing is just on point, and it's written and directed by women, so I really recommend supporting the movie if you can. I don't necessarily want to recommend going to a crowded public place at the moment because, you know, pandemic, but I don't know, if you can, then see the movie if you haven't already. Okay, so that's it. That was 8 books, and I liked them all, so go me. Good job selecting books to read. I guess it's a little bit cheating if half of the books you're reading in a month are rereads of a book that you already like, but sometimes you just gotta. What did you read this month? What are you reading right now? I don't know. Tell me something. Comment down below. You know how to do it. Okay, bye. Also, just wanted to point out that my sidekick is here. He's ever present. He never leaves.